On today's episode of Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
As a Black person in America, you can't automatically just turn it off. Everything about our existence is political. Our joy is political.
And I said, so what is it going to take for you to vote? And I want somebody like me. And I said, so why don't you run?
My legacy is when I close my eyes, I want folks to say, job well done.
I have the pleasure of speaking with not just one, but two really fabulous people. And when I say today's conversation is amazing, it is amazing. So amazing, in fact, that it will also be a two-parter, which I love, because then we can dive even deeper into the lives of these profound people. So I'd like to introduce you to Shanay Whittaker and her husband, Ken Whittaker. Shanay is the director of Michigan Campaigns for Reproductive Freedom for All, and Ken is the executive director of Michigan United. And also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please send us an email to stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. So I'm really excited to have this fabulous couple on Sticky Note Conversations today. We've had an opportunity to run into each other on many occasions at the many different conferences that we attend over the course of the years, as we are all trying to make it work and fight for liberation and democracy and economic freedom for the community. So I thought it would be a really great idea to introduce my listeners to both Shanay and Ken, and talk a little bit about the work they're doing and figure out how on this earth they are able to balance, and if they are able to balance doing movement work and political engagement and civic engagement work and be married and raise a family and still like each other. Like, all of that is the conversation, because they do like each other. So that, if you didn't, then I'd be like, maybe not. But because I know that you do, and I know that y'all like being in each other's company. So I'm like, I had to figure out how they make that work. So welcome Shanay and Ken to Sticky Note Conversations.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with Shanay, because ladies first, and that's how we roll. Shanay Whittaker is the director of Michigan Campaigns for Reproductive Freedom for All. And before that, she was the director of strategic partnerships for Michigan Voices, where she played a key role as the convener of the Michigan Voices Reproductive Justice Work Group, which successfully launched in 2022 to work on Michigan Proposal 3 campaign. But Shanay, I'm actually going to have you introduce yourself and how you see yourself, how you identify as, if there's more to it than that.
Well, I identify as a daughter of a product of the Great Migration and a product of the Caribbean American exodus to the United States. The work that I do is a reflection of how I was raised, whether it is the reproductive freedom movement, whether it's saving democracy with GLTV, getting out the vote, and fighting for individual rights. I think I just owe it to my folks, my ancestors. So I see myself as a mom. I see myself as a steward of this earth. I see myself as a grandchild of a church mother. So you already know how that goes.
So I was going to say, that says a lot right there.
One of those. So I'm one of those kids, and whatever they taught me to do and doing right by my people, that's what I do. And that's basically me in a nutshell. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a grandma too. But at the end of the day, I'm the church mother's grandchild. That's it.
And so tell me how you got involved with this work, and not just the reproductive justice piece of it, but just overall the political and civic engagement work. Was that something that you thought about doing as a career from the beginning, or did you stumble upon it?
Yeah, I stumbled upon it because I had a mom and grandma who were service first people. Like I said, my grandmother was the mother of the church, so you know what that meant. She was also on the missionary board, and I was on the usher board, and I was in, a choir kid. So that meant that you gave back to your community. That meant that when I was a kid in the 1980s, growing up in the Bronx, New York, I saw my mom at the community centers teaching kids how to dance because she was a dancer at the Dance Theater of Harlem. So doing that work and doing community work and centering the folks in my community, that's been ingrained in me since I was, a baby. For me, coming into politics, actually, what actually was the moment that I said, okay, I think I'm interested in this. It was the 1984 election. Jesse Jackson came to New York City. He was in Harlem, and I'm a little kid. I'm only like 6, 7 years old, but I knew what it was about. And that was monumental for me as a Black girl in the Bronx. And then seeing Geraldine Ferraro on the ticket as a New York City person, seeing someone who sounds like, has that gritty accent like me, that really changed my perspective. And it said to me, growing up, this is what I want to do. This is something I'm interested in. And I see myself being a part of it. I didn't always want to do this, but at that point, when I was that age, this is something that really hit my heart. And, growing up in the 80s, seeing the crack epidemic, how it destroyed the community, seeing folks play aunties and uncles dying from AIDS in the 1980s, actually losing relatives to AIDS in the 1980s, that really impacted me too, because I felt like the community that I lived in, Black middle class community, was thrown into turmoil, like it was all over the country. Drugs were infesting our communities, over policing was happening, and we were losing people left and right. So I was like, growing up, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to see that happen. So that and the service piece really inspired me to do this work. There are circumstances growing up where I grew up. It wasn't like always happy-go-lucky. I grew up in a very hard place. And as I grew up, I said to myself, I don't want somebody to experience what I went through, whether it was physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, stuff that I went through. I've seen people die in front of me, get shot and killed in front of me, stuff, in New York City that was honestly part of growing up. So I said, whatever I do, I want to make the world better than what I see. And I don't want the next person to experience what I experienced growing up. So it's very complex, I can say. Being a kid from the Bronx and being in New York City and seeing the good, really, really good, having that foundation of the Black church, of course, and then seeing the bad, the really, really bad, and still overcoming all of that to be in this place today.
So Ken's snapping because his wife is saying all the good things.
I get it from her.
So I'd like to introduce Ken, who is the executive director of Michigan United and has been for how many? Has it been? You said 8 years, 9 years?
Nope, 3 years. I've been this
3. Oh, 3 years.
Yep, 3 years now. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, 3-year anniversary.
I'm giving you some extra years. Okay, well, congratulations, 3-year anniversary of being executive director of Michigan United. And so you've been instrumental in shaping the organization's direction and impact. And so tell us a little bit about what Michigan United does and how, well, first let's ask, how do you identify how do you introduce yourself?
I am Ken Whittaker, son of a letter carrier. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a clown at times. I just love to have fun, love life, and I love the garden. And I look at myself as, a freedom fighter, or like I'm like born and raised to do this. Cause I look at Shanay and I'm like, she's super cultured and like she's supposed to be here. And I just look at myself as someone who just fought the battles as they come, and I wound up here.
So when you got into this work, in this political and civic engagement work, was this something that you had an eye towards, or did you stumble into it as well? What was your pathway like to get here?
Not at all. I mean, honestly, I was dragged into this work, almost literally. Um, I
Kicking and screaming?
uh, more like stumbling a little bit. Honestly, my mom had died, and um, I was really having a hard go at life. And my best friend from high school, I call my brother, Isaac Robinson. Um, he beat on my door as he saw me inside and was like, "You got to come out." And I just wouldn't. But after 3 days of coming to my door and looking through the windows, I finally opened it, and he took me out for some Church's fried chicken strips, and they did that for about 3 or 4 straight days, and finally came back and he had a piece of paper and he said, "I got something for you." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Don't worry about it, just sign it." And, we had the kind of relationship where I just signed it, and he came back a couple days later and said, "All right, you're gonna be on the ballot. You're gonna run for precinct delegate." And I'm like, "What's that?" And he told me what it was, and he said, "Don't worry, nobody ever runs for it. You'll win." And then he came back a few days later and said, "We got a problem." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Somebody's actually running for the seat. You got a campaign." I said, "What do you mean?" And then he handed me a stack of cards with my name on it and the American flag and said, "Now you got to walk your precinct. Here's a map." And I'm like, my mom just died. I'm depressed. But I walked that map, and each person that I stopped at was like, "Oh, little Kenny, we've been wondering about you. We heard that your mom died." Because my mom was the letter carrier for our neighborhood. And everybody that I talked to was like, auntie and uncle. They were watching out for me as I grew up. They see me walk to school, see me walk home. If I stepped out the house and I wasn't supposed to, they call my mama. If they saw me doing something I wasn't supposed to do, back then they'll step out the house and whoop your butt and then call your mama and tell you that they did it. So it just gave me new life. And the conversations that I just had on those doors just really just inspired me. And I walked into a Democratic Party meeting after winning precinct delegate. And Isaac told me, just tell them your ideas. And so I did that. And long story short, the rest is history. Um, I stumbled into grassroots organizing and issue work after spending a lot of time in Democratic activism, or I used to call myself a Democratic operative. But now I find myself where I think I really, really need to be, and that's in issue organizing and grassroots work.
So explain what a precinct delegate is for those who aren't familiar with the inside party politic work.
Well, a precinct delegate is the lowest division of a political district. So the precinct, the precinct is, and the precinct delegate is like the captain of that division. So we spread the news of the party, what's going on, get people involved as much as we can, try and get as many people out to vote in our precinct as possible, just to make sure that everybody stays engaged. But also they're the delegate to the county convention. So it used to be a time where in Michigan, the precinct delegates were the ones that actually choose who goes on the ballot in the primary. Now that's kind of been taken away. It's like any party member can vote at this point. But the precinct delegates used to be the ones who actually voted for the people who actually were on the ballot in the primary in many of the different races. So now we're pretty much the cheerleaders of the party in our precincts, and I took it pretty seriously. I would just walk door to door and talk to everybody in the precinct. Elections coming up, make sure to register to vote. The district meeting is coming up. You should come out to the district meeting. So and so is going to speak. So you really want to hear what they got to say. I kind of took it to another level of come on out and cause some trouble.
And your precinct, about how big was that you would be walking door to door? How many people do you think you were talking to?
About 800 or 900.
Okay. So that takes a while. That takes a while. And that's an unpaid position?
Oh, very much unpaid. Mm-hmm. Unpaid, unheralded. It's like some of us call it the lowest of the elected positions. But honestly, I didn't look at it like that. I thought that the precinct delegates, and still do, are like the lifeblood of the political party.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so tell us a little bit about Michigan United. What does Michigan United do? What is their mission?
Well, our mission is to win justice and equity across racial, gender, and economic lines for Black, Brown, and immigrants in the state of Michigan. We're a grassroots organizing organization. We're statewide, and I'm trying to pivot us into concentrating on organizing the 3.5% of the population of Michigan that it takes to hit the streets and make any large change possible. There's a lot of organizations around, and I just wanted to make sure that we differentiated ourselves and concentrated on just building 3.5% of the population through leadership development, small campaigns that make substantial changes and tangible changes in people's lives to get them to see that they actually have agency and that they're not just cogs in the wheel or victims, to society. I felt very victimized growing up and seeing the different challenges that my mom had. And then, I got to be grown in the different challenges that I've had. And I just don't want to see people go through that and feel helpless and powerless to make any change about it. As through Michigan United, I kind of transformed myself a bit and learned that there's power in numbers, there's power in money, and that when we take money and we take people and we put them together, it honestly creates like a superpower. And so that's what we've been doing with Michigan United. It's just getting people to learn their superpower, getting them to shake off the dirt and get rid of the scripts that society has given them and have them write their own scripts. I liken Michigan United to a church. You come to Michigan United, you hear the gospel, you hear the good word, and you might, learn something that's really going to change your life and feed you into the next time you step in those doors. But you take what you learn and you go out in life, and you treat others differently. You feel better about yourself. I say that you go to college to learn about life, but you come to Michigan United to learn how to live.
That's a great quote. That's a great quote. Shanay, tell us a little bit about Reproductive Freedom for All and what, which was formerly NARAL, and I still call it the old NARAL because I can never remember I never get the new name right. But tell us a little bit about the mission of that organization and what you're doing over there right now.
Thank you so much. NARAL was formerly Reproductive Freedom for All. We represent the 8 out of 10 Americans that are pro-choice, pro-abortion in the country. Here in Michigan, I represent about 125,000 members who are pro-choice. They believe that decision-making for a woman, a person in their body, should be between themselves, their physician, not politicians. So for me, my job is to, as a state director, director of Michigan campaigns, is to represent those people, to support folks who are advocates of the work that we do, to make sure that they're elected, to also move our members up the leadership ladder of engagement, to not just ask them to do routine things, but to actually go out there and to make a difference, to go to our lawmakers, to talk about reproductive freedom, to talk about those issues that impact everyday Americans. And again, representing those 8 out of 10 Americans who believe in a woman's right to choose.
And so, because you are a self-identified, church girl and granddaughter of the church mother, doing this work specifically around abortion care and abortion rights, have you received any pushback or felt any conflict in working on this particular issue, or has that conversation come up with the community?
No. Honestly, no. I mean, there are people that are anti-choice, of course. But I can talk about what happened here in Michigan. Here in Michigan, 57% of voters said yes to Proposal 3. That meant to put a constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion rights in our Constitution. One of my jobs as the deputy director of the campaign was to build a coalition that represented all of Michigan. In my bio, it talks about, the convener of this Michigan Voices work group that we had that actually launched this ballot initiative. And it was made up of groups from all over the state, including religious groups. And those folks felt that if we don't have this, what other rights are going to be taken away? One of my most profound conversations that I had throughout the course of the campaign was talking to religious leaders here in the city of Detroit. I'll be quick, but this is basically what summed up what I knew, why we were going to win this campaign. When I went to this church, it was full of preachers in the city of Detroit. I spotted off the talking points because you're not if you're campaign mode, you stick to the talking points, you stick to the stuff that you've been given, and you can veer away from it somewhat, but not really stay off. So I did the whole spiel with the talking lines and the talking points, and when the pastor said, "No, that's not it. That's not it. That's not going to cut it." So I said, okay, so let me be frank and let me be honest. So I basically told my personal story, and I'll say it right here. I was born in New York, came out here in 2008, living in New York City. Like I said, grandma was the head of the household. She was the everything, a mother to church, everything like that. When she passed away, my mom fell apart. My mom started taking drugs. She was into crack cocaine, all that. This is the 80s and early 90s. She fell into hard times. Like at one point, she couldn't pay the bills. So I am a teenager, about 14 years old. I'm a twin as well. And I'm the oldest of her children. I have 7 sisters and brothers. So I take on this responsibility as a teenager, 9th grade, to pay my mom's bills, to make sure we have the lights on. You know what I'm saying? To food, make sure we're cooking food, whatever. Making sure my siblings got to school, and also making sure that I got to school as well. I couldn't do that. I am 14 years old, negotiating a contract to keep our lights on. I couldn't do that. So at one point we had to leave our home, couldn't afford to live there. Everything fell apart. We had to move in a shelter in the Bronx, New York. In that shelter, I seen the worst of the worst. I saw people get shot at. My twin has a bullet in her head to this day. She got shot. I've seen people commit suicide. I've seen like a lot. I was sexually assaulted in that shelter. At the same time, I'm having a boyfriend, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm not getting the things I need from my mom. My dad, God bless him, may rest in peace, he's in the box downstairs. He wasn't doing anything for me. At that time, those times you sent your daughter down south. We didn't have that. I didn't have those relationships with my folks. Again, my matriarch, my queen, my grandmother passed away. So, coming up in this environment where you're seeing all this stuff, there's the drugs, the filth, the worst of the worst, I had to make a decision. Whether I, as a teenager, 17 years old, going to have a baby in this environment, in a shelter, or do I have this option of terminating my pregnancy? I chose to terminate my pregnancy. I made that decision because at that point, I did not have a support system. I was fortunate enough to be in a state where I can make that decision about my body without my mother's permission. At that time, my mom was like, she was out of it. Sometimes she'd be okay, and the next minute she was calling me somebody else, and she would accuse me of things, and she was really bad to the point that she was physically and emotionally abusive to me. And when I told that story, and I said, this is why I'm here today. So I understand, so folks can understand that there are other girls that have been in my situation that have to make those decisions about their body. They don't have a mom and dad to turn to. They don't have a trusted adult that they can confide in, that they have these resources that are available. I don't know if I'd be here today if I didn't make that decision. So when I said that to those pastors, they got it. They understood that, because not everybody has this ideal home that we hear about so much with the parents and everything. I'm fortunate enough as a parent myself now with grown children to provide that kind of love to my children, all 6 of them, 4 girls, 2 boys. But I didn't have that at the time, so I had to make that decision, and those pastors got it. And I've been unapologetic about telling my story, because I feel like we have to have this conversation in the community. We have to have this conversation in the community. We have to normalize these conversations, especially around trauma that young people endure when parents are not there for them. So I got the support of Black pastors throughout the state by telling my story. I also spoke to folks up in northern Michigan, rural Michigan, where there's hardly any Black folks there. And I get people telling me, I was in your shoes, but I'm white and I lived in northern Michigan. And that's what I had to deal with. So, telling my personal story really made a difference, and it really helped people know that they're not alone, that this is not something that should be taboo, that we should have conversations around this, and that we should have those protections in place. And again, I'm so proud of the work that the coalition that I work with, we put together, and having 57% of the state ratify this and pass this and put this in Michigan's constitution.
I think it's so important, that piece. And, I think it connects, with pastors, because it's a testimony, right? And
yes, it is.
Even more so, we're telling our story so that other folks don't feel alone in whatever that story is. And it's one of the main reasons that, I do the work that I do, and that I even have this podcast, because I knew that if I could marry my love of journalism and my love for the political organizing and movement building, that I'd be a happier person, and I would be able to do something in a different way. And so, and knowing also that we have to be able to tell our stories and create the narrative and control the narrative to be what we need it to be, and not something someone else is making up about us. And I have found it a little bit difficult in a lot of situations to get folks to open up about their abortion stories, specifically because Make It Work Nevada is working on the same ballot initiative that will be on our ballot in November. And so we're in the signature gathering phase of things. But once that part is done, and then we're out and we're organizing and educating people on what this proposal will do, and when the election is, all of that good stuff, I know that it will also be important for folks to understand the why, and not get lost in the nastiness of the fight for pro-choice versus anti-choice, basically. And so I think it's really important that we can all tell our stories, whatever they look like. So I appreciate you doing that, and then having to do it over and over again. Like, that's a lot. So, did it ever get hard? Did it ever get harder to do?
It's a lot. Did it get harder? No. Like you said, it's my testimony. I tell folks all the time, I'm saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized. member of Church of God in Christ. I did all of that. Baptist, you name it, I did it. I've been a part of it. It's a part of me. And at the same time, I'm a person of service. Service for me is everything. Serving my community, making sure that the next generation has experience better and more than I have. That's a part of my job here as a rent living on this earth. I'm looking at right in front of me a picture of Shirley Chisholm. The movie just dropped. She's one of my heroes. Like her, my mom's folks, they're from the West Indies. So I have that influence as well. And I understand like the magnitude of the work that she did and standing up and telling her story. And even the folks that opposed what she was doing when it wasn't cool, talked about her and kind of derailed what she had to do. Folks had to, people like us, we experienced that every day, but we still kept pushing. So it's not hard to tell my story. I get that there are people out there who've experienced the similar things that I've experienced, but giving them the opportunity to have those conversations and just opening up and being vulnerable. I think that was one of the reasons why we won, that we created an environment, our coalition, where we could be vulnerable, where we could be our most authentic selves in this space, where I can be unapologetically me, where the folks that I worked with can be unapologetically them. Anytime I go out and speak about what we did on the campaign, I always highlight the work of our partners, because if it wasn't for them pushing the organizations that were deciding on this, we wouldn't be here today. Those are the folks that serve people like me that are marginalized, that are experiencing homelessness or poverty, or people that have experienced abuse and neglect, people that have been in the criminal justice system as well, people who've gone hungry, people who haven't had folks advocate for them in education, anything like that. So, I don't mind telling. I'm going to keep telling it till the cows come home. I told my mom, I said, you're going to be mad at me. I told her what I was doing. But, she'll be all right, but it is what it is. And she's apologized for a lot of it now. But that's real. And even then, she told me about her story. She also experienced an abortion at 15. And this was before Roe. So this was a back alley abortion. So, it happens. It happens to millions of Americans. And why not normalize the conversation?
Right. And nobody wants to go back to, those back alley abortions where so many people lost their lives or their ability to have children when they would be able to have the opportunity to do so the way they wanted to.
Correct. I don't want to go back. At one point after Dobbs was overturned, I said to folks, I said, my daughters have less rights than I did. That says something. And
it's mind-boggling.
Yes. And in states like Mississippi, Alabama, where my family's from, on my daddy's side, and Arkansas, they got less rights than we do than when I was in my 20s or when I was in my baby making era. That's crazy. And I'm pushing 50 now. So, what are they experiencing? The only way you can receive reproductive care is if you have money and you can travel up to states like Michigan, places like Illinois, for reproductive care. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Ken, you said something about private shames to public power. Say more.
Yeah, I'm like, this society teaches you to be ashamed. It basically tells you to, just shut up and go along. Don't talk about, the bad things that are happening. I mean, we're taught to just like keep your dirty laundry. And, I found through telling of stories like Shanay was saying that honestly, there's so many other people that are going through some of the same stuff and you wouldn't even know it unless you open up your mouth and talk. So, just like her, when I began to tell, my personal stories and things that were going on with me, I started to not feel so alone. It's not that, misery love company. It was more of like, damn, okay, it's not just me. And then it got to the point of, all right, well, if all of these other people are going through the same thing and we start talking in the same voice and demanding change, it starts to turn into a movement, and then a movement in order to change policy to make our lives better. So that's what I'm like, turning our private shames into public power. And that's, something I learned at Michigan United. When I walked into Michigan United, I was saddled in payday loan debt. I thought it was just my fault. I just done something so wrong, and I deserved this pain that I was going through that was affecting, my family in ways that were just unimaginable. And then I told my story in front of about 200 people, and it was scary at first, but everybody was just nodding their heads. And then I asked the question, I'm like, how many of y'all, got payday loan debt? And it seemed like a third of the room raised their hand, and another third of the room had it and gotten out of it. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're all having the same problem, And then a very smart organizer was like, so what are you going to do about it? What if I told
poverty
you?
is expensive.
Right. What if I told you that these payday loan companies are just in your neighborhoods? They're preying on Black and brown neighborhoods. Then the question came, was like, do you have banks in your neighborhood? No. Do you have supermarkets in your neighborhood? No. Do you have a lot of liquor stores in your neighborhood? Yeah. What if I told you that this is a plan to divest in your neighborhood and take away good schools and take away access to inexpensive avenues of obtaining money? And it opened up my eyes, and opened up a lot of eyes. And as we just began to band together, it led into a campaign, that we ran against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to change the payday loan laws. And then I find myself on the steps of the DNC demanding that Debbie Washington Schultz step outside and take delivery of these 5,000 signatures of payday loan sufferers, that demand that the laws were changed, and that, that we're actually being preyed upon. And, you can't say that, oh, it's just our fault when you just had a freaking predatory, mortgage bubble bust. When you're being preyed upon and you feel like you don't have any other choice, hell, you want to live. So you take that step regardless of how much it's going to hurt. And then when people start to learn how much you pay in fees and how it's literally a debt trap, you start to pay attention. I wound up in front of in front of Congress testifying about this. And I'm happy to say that, some laws were changed, but, that same story just plays itself out issue after issue after issue, whether it's fighting against deportations and for fair immigration laws, whether it's for fighting for criminal justice system and having good time credits or rehabilitation credits. That same story plays out. And that's telling your story, because they're the threads that actually connect each of us together. Otherwise, we just walk around this earth feeling like we're alone and feeling ashamed. And that's exactly how this society, this government actually wants us to feel. Because the moment that we get together, and that's what I talk about, that 3.5%, the moment we get together and realize that we're all going through some of the same stuff, and we start to yelling and screaming together, can't nobody stop us. Nobody can stop us.
That 3.5% that you talked about, is that a specific demographic of folks or just an overall 3.5?
Just an overall 3.5%. In the state of Michigan, that comes out to about 350,000 people. You get 350,000 people in this state riled up about the pains that they're going through, understanding that change is possible, that we are failing at the beginning of people's lives. I'm talking about child care, and at the end of people's lives, I'm talking about elder care, and saying that this government needs to be doing something about it. Guess what? This government don't do something about it.
The dryer has finished running.
Oh, the dryer has finished running.
Look, we got to multitask in this work. So what are the top issues that Michigan United works on?
Immigrant rights. We were born as an immigrant rights organization, and that led into criminal justice reform, as began to see that you can't really have an immigrant rights program and you're finding that immigrants are criminalized. And it led into healthcare fights and public health fights. Now we've moved into environmental justice as we find that it's the Black and brown communities that are sitting in basically islands of poison and pollution. We find over and over again that the different ills of this state are put upon Black and brown people. So environmental justice, criminal justice reform, immigrant rights, healthcare, public health. And we realize that we can't just be advocating for change. It takes more than that. We needed to take power in the legislature. So we developed the movement politics program, not to get people to just talk about candidates. Sure, a candidate. It's about the issues that candidate is standing on and is feeling from within, from their lived experience. So we started to develop candidates to run for office that wasn't just about themselves, but were about building a movement. So that when people walk into the legislature, they're not just skipping like lambs to the slaughter towards our lobbyist house, but they're skipping into this legislature with a movement of people behind them, feeling more powerful than they did the day of the election. A lot of these candidates, they win on election day and they say, yay, I did it. But when our candidates win, they go like, yay, we did it. And the day after the election, their office isn't empty. They're not cleaning it out. The lights aren't off. Instead, it's humming and buzzing. Okay, now we can co-govern together. Now we can write policy together. And we start to plan out that inside game and the outside game. Okay, this is going to get introduced. This is what needs to happen on the outside to make sure that there's pressure on the other people on the inside. We've had our speaker pro tem come through our Movement Politics Academy. We've got the majority floor leader that have come through our Movement Politics Academy. And these are organizers. So they're not there just to write laws and co-sponsor a bill. They're there to organize the other legislators, because we have to be able to build this change on the inside and on the outside. So we just try and focus on the whole person. We're not monoliths. I'm not just about payday loan debt. We lost our home. When my mother died, and to a predatory loan, and I had to take over the house, and I couldn't keep up with it. I've had my friends deported and watched their families stay here and struggle. I've had co-workers and friends living in the most polluted zip code in this state, 48217. Had healthcare issues from my mother to myself, to my wife, to my grandmother, elder care issues with my grandmother. So we're not monoliths. So Michigan United makes sure that it's about the whole person and not just one issue.
You brought up a couple of things that I think are important. Well, one thing, Shanay had brought up the Shirley Chisholm movie, which I watched, I think, last weekend, and I really, really liked it. Did you enjoy the movie? Because I really enjoyed the movie.
I did. I enjoyed it, and it honestly, it left me wanting a lot more. But that's every movie. It's like you just try and condense a life down into an hour and a half or 2 hours at the most. And some of these movies like add in that extra half an hour and make it 2.5. It just, I know that there's so much more, especially being married to Shanay. I really know there's so much more because she'll go on and on about it. Right. So I get to hear a lot that's in between the lines, of a movie. So, but I thought the movie was great. It was just a lot more that could have been told.
Yeah. And I think that, Shanay, something you said towards the beginning around how you felt when you were seeing these elections as a little girl and feeling inspired and hearing that accent and all of that, and seeing someone who looks like you or could remind you of yourself. And then it makes me think about respectability politics. And it makes me think about a lot of the candidates we might get now, and not seeing that grittiness, not feeling that you actually did come from where I came from, and that you really understand me, and understand my plight of what's going on, and wondering, do you see candidates like that now? And if not, how are you all, and you can jump in too, because you have this training. Are you training folks and reminding them that, people don't really want the sanitized, buttoned up version of things, that folks want to see the real?
Well, I'm like Ken, where I'm a big proponent of issue-based organizing. I think that we all can find a common thread amongst each other if we focus on the issues rather than the personality of a candidate. When we looked at Prop 3, I always use this as an example because I was there. People from all walks of life came together, and this was an opportunity for Michiganders to save ourselves. A politician wasn't going to save us when the Dobbs decision came out. We decided as a coalition to do this. Before that, because we saw a bunch of folks, black, brown, white folks, poor, rich, conservative, liberal, of religious, non-religious people who really cared about their community come together and voted for Proposal 3. So this the notion about the candidate, that's one thing. For me, that issue-based organizing, that's the heart of the matter. That's where you can get those personal stories. That's where you can bond with a person around a specific issue, a common issue. And for us in 2022, it was reproductive freedom. And we'll see it again in 2024. Again, with all the ballot initiatives happening in other states, and then folks on the other side talking about bans, that people will come together around this issue because this hits home. This is it's not just a issue of freedom, but it's an economic issue as well. And people get it. Americans get it when it comes to reproductive freedom. So candidates, one thing, that issue-based organizing, having those conversations, the relational discussions around what can bring us together really matters. And folks from all over the state, if you're familiar with Michigan, what happens in southeastern Michigan may not move folks in southwestern Michigan. What happens in the Upper Peninsula, called the UP, may not move folks in Monroe County or in Ann Arbor. But the actual issue per se, like reproductive freedom, people got it. And I trust that folks will get it again in 2024.
Man, I swear it sounds like Shanay running for office. But
Are you trying to talk her into that?
No.
I have for years, and she always says no. I'm like, one day, she's like, no. But honestly, it speaks to people need to see themselves in a candidate. And when I say see themselves, I don't mean just look like me or walk like me, talk like me, or live where I live, but like experience the things that I've experienced. And don't be afraid to tell me what you've experienced. I'm getting tired of seeing, white men that just got money and just walk in the office, when white men with money are just like third of this state, but like 60% of the legislature. I need to actually flip that. I want to see somebody who knows what it is to go to a public school and eat nasty pizza and graham crackers out of a package, to
That
understand what
nasty.
it is. Was it though?
It was so nasty.
Understand what it is to walk a mile and a half to get on the school bus, to ride 2 hours in order to get to a decent school, and actually want to change that. But when you don't have these real lived experiences, how can you actually connect to the majority of the constituents that you serve? And it's no wonder why people aren't as engaged in the political system. It's because they don't have representatives that they feel that they can connect to. Especially when I talk to young black men, I ask them, why you don't vote? I ain't voting for that clown. I'm like, why is there a clown? I don't know nothing about them. I'm like, why don't you know nothing about them? Do you actually go to their coffee hours? Do you talk to them? Well, no. I just feel like that. And I said, so what is it going to take for you to vote? And I want somebody like me. And I said, so why don't you run? Who said you couldn't? Who told you wasn't enough to do this? If you saw somebody that's like you, experience the things that you experience, would you talk to them? Yeah. And I said, do you know other people that would talk to them? Yeah. So why don't you run? And that's how we begin to change the face of politics around here. You got to get out of this vanilla stuff, you know. We use something called deep canvassing. And I'll tell you, you know, quick story. I was running a canvas with Michigan United on the downriver communities of Michigan. And there was a teacher running named Darren Kim Whittaker. And we actually didn't talk about him per se. We talked about, the issues of family care. Because of course we're an issue-based organization. And I went to walking up on this house, and there was a white gentleman on the side of the house, and he sees me come walking up. I got on at the time, my signature, like Stetson looking hat and a black coat. And he looks at me and goes, what the heck? I walk up on the porch, and he comes walking around the side of the house. So what do you want? I said, I just wanted to talk to you about some issues. I said, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. I'm like, I'm not here to talk to you about Hillary Clinton. Oh, well, I know you ain't here to talk to me about Donald Trump. I'm like, I'm not here to talk to you about Donald Trump either. What do you want then? And I says, well, I'm a sandwich baby. What do you mean? I says, I take care of my grandmother. I take care of my kids too. I have an autoimmune disease. My wife has an autoimmune disease. We're sandwiched between two generations. And I'm just wondering if there's other people who actually care for their families in the way that we have to care for ours, despite how much money we make or what other education we have. I'm just talking to other people who might be having some of the same experiences that I have. And his whole face changed. He says, oh, okay. I says, do you have to know anybody that has to take care of their family? He said, yeah, I take care of my brother. And I says, you do that by yourself? He said, yeah, my siblings don't do nothing. I got to do it myself. I'm like, oh, you must be well off. He says, no, this is expensive. And I'm like, yeah, it is. So do you think that's fair? No, I don't think that's fair. And I said, well, our society is kind of set up that we actually just have to fend for ourselves and fend for the people that we love, no matter what. And can you imagine how much nicer your life would be if you actually didn't have to do that? He said, yeah, I do. I says, do you think it would be good if, like, maybe our government did a little bit more to help people like you and me? Like, yeah, that would be nice. Well, you know, we're putting together a group of folks just to sit and talk about this and maybe come up with some solutions on how we can move forward and just take better care of our families. Would you be interested in that? Yeah, I would. Okay, let me verify your name, verify your phone number, get your email address. Cool. Okay. It says, I told you I wasn't here to talk about, the presidential election, but I do want to let you know that, there is an election coming up, and there's a teacher running for office that actually is in the same situations that we just talked about, I give him a little kicker card. Don't even talk about it, Ken. Just give him a little kicker card. Leave that with him. I says, okay, I'll be talking to you another time. And as I'm walking away, he says, hey. I turned around and looked at him. He says, you're a pretty good guy. I just hope I recognize you during the race war. And I said, wow, you're a good guy too. I kept on walking. And I tell that story, and some people, they just kind of like amazed, but it still speaks to people are connected by stories, no matter what you look like, where you live, how much money you got. We still go through some of the same things across demographic and across geographic lines. And when I said that we want people running for office that, look like us, talk like us, walk like us, but more so, with the same experience that we had, so that they understand what we're going through and they actually have more of a passion to change it.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington, with music, mixing, and editing by Black Gypsy LLC. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.